Hi, Premier. Good to see you. Thank you so much for making the time.
Vashi, how are you?
Good, thank you. And I hope you're well as well. I wanted to start off on the tariffs that we do know are in effect on the auto sector, because I had read an interview that you gave not too long ago in which you said if those did go through, that, you know, a downturn in the economy in Ontario of a scale similar to this would have an impact on your province. Can you just detail how?
Of course. Well, I mean, Ontario is the economic engine, really, of the rest of Canada. So if there is a downturn in the Ontario economy, that is going to ripple across the rest of Canada without any question. If there's a downturn in the GDP of Ontario, there's going to be a downturn in the GDP of Canada, and subsequently that's going to impact people in Newfoundland and Labrador. But it's beyond just the metrics of and the financial implications for subnational economies. This is a national moment, and if there are families who are out of work, if there are full industries impacted in Ontario, then that is a national issue, and that will be felt here in Newfoundland and Labrador. At the beginning of this issue, I felt that there could be no scenario in which region was pitted against region or industry against industry. And so this calls for a national united front to help support, in particular, Ontario in this situation with respect to auto manufacture and the good people who work in that industry.
Do you feel this is a complete, as it's been called by some other leaders, a complete reorientation of the global trading relationship as we had once pictured it to be?
I absolutely do. I think as Canadians are unpackaging yesterday's announcement, they need to look at it in different buckets, and one distinct impact or one distinct package is global trade and the global marketplace. And yesterday, that was upended. The marketplace was turned on its head, and each individual country now will be responding in their own right. I think this creates an incredible amount of uncertainty, and you can think in Canada or Newfoundland and Labrador that we live a long ways away from Japan or Taiwan or other markets in the world, and that is true, but investors come to Canada because of our vast natural resources. So if you're an investor in Japan right now and you're looking at a mine or a hydrogen project, for example, in Newfoundland and Labrador, the uncertainty that was created with that ridiculous poster yesterday will undoubtedly cause them pause and will undoubtedly cause a massive pause in the investor climate. So that is a concern to us globally. Secondarily, we look at the relationship between Canada and the United States, and that has distinctly and definitively changed. There is no question about it. I do believe that over time, calmer heads, cooler heads, a more mature and rational, logical thought process will prevail. But the trust that has been eroded will take years to rebuild between Canadians and Americans. And then, of course, at the micro level, there is the impact to Canadian families, whether that's from increasing costs of goods and services or from layoffs. I mean, we're hearing today in Ontario alone that there are going to be mass layoffs. And that has not only an impact on those particular families, but that reverberates across the entire country. And this is a national moment, and we need to meet it.
You mentioned, I guess, the posture of yours to not pit one region against each other or one sector against each other. And I would take note out of the Premier's meeting today of listening to other Premier's comments, namely Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who was at the time serving, I should say, in his capacity in that role, not as Liberal leader, which he now is as he heads to Montreal. But both of them, you know, referenced the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan and their efforts and talked about the meeting in very positive terms that took place today, and the degree of unanimity around Canada's response to what is in place. Is that a fair assessment? Like, what can you tell us about the reaction from premiers in the aggregate?
Absolutely. I think there was a very unified approach. There was unified concern for the people in the auto sector in particular, and for Premier Ford and the citizens that he represents. There was not one region versus the other. There was not one industry versus the other. There was a strong, united national voice in support for those directly impacted. There was also strong support for the Prime Minister, by the way, who is doing a great job in changing, if not the economic impacts and the fiscal trajectory of the tariffs, certainly changing the dialogue and the symbolism and the language that the President of the United States is using towards Canada. And that may seem small, and it may seem perhaps unusual and bizarre, what I'm about to say, but we finally have the President of the United States recognizing the country of Canada as a country. Finally have the President of the United States recognizing our elected head of state as the Prime Minister. I take that to be very constructive, but I also take it to be a direct result of the Prime Minister's conversations with the President, and I do think that there should be, as a consequence of those discussions, a path towards resolution on the fiscal and tariff front.
Do you trust it, though? I mean, do you trust any change in posture, to be fair? And while certainly I understand that, you know, in the way Premier Ford described it, we got the best of a bad deal, it's still a bad deal. There are still tariffs that came into effect today, and very significant ones.
Oh, make no mistake, I don't take yesterday as a moment to celebrate, and frankly, I think it's the opposite. It's a day of significant concern. While we weren't on the poster and the placard, that is not reason to celebrate. All those tariffs, as you suggest, still are in place, and now there are additional tariffs. And I would say that there is still a cloud of uncertainty over this that the President has telegraphed with respect to other industries, targeted tariffs potentially coming in lumber, pharmaceuticals, and other industries. So this story is not finished, and there will be ongoing conversations undoubtedly. So I don't take yesterday to celebrate at all. I take it as a significant ongoing concern. And we need to recognize that yesterday was not a good moment for Canada-U.S. relations. It wasn't a good moment for the Canadian economy. But if I'm trying to find the silver lining, and the silver lining that I've seen in the last week is that there has been a change of tone and posture with respect to recognizing Canada as a sovereign country. As bizarre as that is to say coming out of my lips, I understand that. But when for the first time since he's been elected, he has changed how he's referring to Canada and to our Prime Minister.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Premier Furey, thanks so much for your time as always.
Thanks very much, Vashti.